The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training compound as Sarah Martinez adjusted her grip on the rifle. Her calloused hands, rough from months of intensive training, trembled slightly as she checked the weapon one final time. Today was the day that would determine whether she would advance to the elite sniper division or be reassigned to a different unit. The weight of her dreams pressed down on her shoulders like the heavy tactical gear she wore. Sarah had always been different from the other recruits. While most of the young Marines came from military families or had clear paths laid out before them, she had fought tooth and nail just to get here. Growing up in a small town in Arizona, she had been raised by her grandmother after her parents died in a car accident when she was 12. Her grandmother, Maria, had been a factory worker who instilled in Sarah the values of hard work, determination, and never giving up, no matter how impossible the odds seemed. The shooting range stretched out before her like a battlefield of opportunity. Targets dotted the landscape at various distances, from simple paper silhouettes at 50 yards to complex moving targets at over 800 yards. This was not just a test of marksmanship, but a comprehensive evaluation of her ability to perform under pressure, adapt to changing conditions, and maintain focus for extended periods. As Sarah walked toward her assigned position, she noticed the subtle glances and whispered conversations among her fellow Marines. Being one of only 3 women in the advanced marksmanship program had made her a constant subject of scrutiny. Some of the men respected her abilities and treated her as an equal, but others seemed to view her presence as an unwelcome intrusion into their traditionally male domain. Sergeant Davis, the range instructor, approached with a clipboard in his hand and a stern expression on his weathered face. He had served 3 tours in Afghanistan and had a reputation for being fair but uncompromising in his standards. His gray hair was cropped short in military fashion, and his piercing blue eyes seemed to see through any pretense or weakness. "Martinez," he called out, his voice carrying across the morning air. "You ready for this?" Sarah straightened her posture and looked him directly in the eyes. "Yes, Sergeant. I've been preparing for months." "Good. Because today isn't just about hitting targets. It's about proving you belong here. The sniper program isn't for everyone, and we need to know you can handle the pressure when lives depend on your shot." She nodded, understanding the gravity of what lay ahead. The sniper program was legendary within the Marines for producing some of the most skilled marksmen in the world. Graduates went on to serve in the most dangerous and critical missions, often operating alone behind enemy lines where a single shot could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Sarah made her way to the equipment station where the rifles were stored. Each weapon had been carefully maintained and calibrated, representing thousands of hours of engineering and precision manufacturing. She reached for the rifle that had been assigned to her, a state-of-the-art precision instrument that she had been training with for the past several weeks. As her hands closed around the familiar weight of the weapon, something felt wrong. The balance seemed off, and, when she examined the scope, she noticed that the mounting appeared to have been tampered with. Her heart sank as she realized that someone had deliberately sabotaged her equipment. The scope was loose, the barrel had been slightly bent, and several crucial components appeared to have been deliberately damaged. Looking around the range, she saw several Marines from her unit watching her with expressions that ranged from curiosity to barely concealed satisfaction. Among them was Private Johnson, a young man from Texas who had made no secret of his belief that women had no place in combat roles. He had been particularly vocal about his opposition to Sarah's presence in the program, often making comments about how she was taking a spot that belonged to a real Marine. Standing next to Johnson was Private Stevens, whose father was a decorated Marine colonel. Stevens had grown up with privilege and connections that had smoothed his path through every stage of military training. He had never had to fight for recognition or respect, and he seemed to resent anyone who threatened his sense of entitlement to success. Sarah's mind raced as she considered her options. She could report the sabotage to Sergeant Davis, but that would mean admitting that she had discovered the problem and potentially delaying or canceling the qualification test. It would also pay to target on her back and make her appear weak or unable to handle the challenges that came with military life. Alternatively, she could attempt to fix the weapon herself, but that would mean working without proper tools or equipment while the clock ticked down toward the start of the test. The other Marines were already taking their positions, and the range would become active within the next 30 minutes. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory, words that had sustained Sarah through countless difficult moments in her life. Mija, Maria used to say, when the world tries to knock you down, you don't ask for help to stand up. You find a way to stand up stronger than before. Sarah made her decision. She would repair the weapon herself and complete the qualification regardless of the obstacles that had been placed in her path. Taking the damaged rifle, she moved to a quiet corner of the preparation area where she could work without drawing attention to herself. Using her basic field maintenance kit and some improvised tools, she began the delicate process of repairing the sabotage. The scope mounting required careful adjustment to ensure proper alignment, while the barrel needed to be straightened using techniques she had learned from watching the base armorers work. As she worked, Sarah's mind drifted back to the events that had led her to this moment. The decision to join the Marines had not been easy. After graduating from high school, she had worked 2 jobs to support herself and her aging grandmother while attending community college part-time. The military had offered her a chance for education, training, and a career that could provide stability and purpose. Boot camp had been brutal, but Sarah had emerged stronger and more determined than ever. She had excelled in academics, physical fitness, and tactical training, consistently ranking in the top 10% of her class. When the opportunity arose to apply for the advanced marksmanship program, she had seized it despite the skepticism of some of her instructors. The specialized training had pushed her to her limits and beyond. Hours on the shooting range, studying ballistics and weather patterns, learning camouflage and fieldcraft techniques that could mean the difference between life and death in combat situations. Sarah had absorbed every lesson, practiced every skill until it became second nature. Now, as she carefully adjusted the damaged components of her rifle, she drew upon all of that training and experience. Her fingers worked with steady precision, making minute adjustments that would restore the weapon's accuracy. She checked and rechecked each modification, knowing that even the smallest error could result in missed shots and a failed qualification. The morning air grew warmer as the sun climbed higher, and Sarah could hear the other Marines going through their final preparations. Some were doing breathing exercises to calm their nerves, while others were making last-minute adjustments to their equipment. The atmosphere was tense with anticipation and competition. Sergeant Davis's voice boomed across the range as he called for the Marines to take their positions. Sarah looked down at her repaired rifle, satisfied that she had done everything possible to restore its functionality. The scope was properly aligned, the barrel was straight, and all of the components appeared to be working correctly. As she walked toward her assigned shooting position, Sarah felt the weight of history on her shoulders. She was not just representing herself in this qualification, but every woman who had ever been told that she was not strong enough, smart enough, or tough enough to serve in combat. The Marines who had sabotaged her weapon believed that they could break her spirit and force her out of the program, but they had underestimated her determination and resourcefulness. The shooting positions were spaced 20 feet apart, each one equipped with a shooting mat, sandbags for support, and a spotting scope for target identification. Sarah settled into her assigned position and began the process of preparing for the qualification course. She arranged her equipment methodically, ensuring that everything was within easy reach and properly positioned. The first stage of the qualification would test basic marksmanship skills at distances ranging from 100 to 300 yards. These were relatively straightforward shots that any competent Marine should be able to make consistently. The real challenge would come in the later stages, where targets would be smaller, distances greater, and environmental factors more challenging. Sarah adjusted her shooting position and brought the rifle up to her shoulder. The familiar weight and balance felt reassuring, despite the repairs she had been forced to make. She peered through the scope and began the process of range estimation and target identification that would be crucial to her success. The targets appeared as small dark shapes against the sandy backdrop of the range. Each one was carefully positioned to test different aspects of marksmanship skill, from precision shooting at stationary targets to tracking and engaging moving targets. The wind was light but variable, requiring constant adjustment and compensation. As Sarah waited for the command to begin firing, she forced herself to remain calm and focused. Her breathing was steady and controlled. Her heart rate remained low despite the pressure of the situation. The months of training had prepared her for this moment, and she was determined to prove that the sabotage had not succeeded in derailing her dreams. Sergeant Davis raised his hand, signaling that the qualification was about to begin. Sarah settled deeper into her shooting position and aligned her sight picture with the first target. The crosshairs centered on the small black circle that represented her immediate goal, and she began the smooth trigger squeeze that would send the first round downrange. The report of the rifle echoed across the range as Sarah fired her first shot. Through her scope, she could see the bullet impact exactly where she had aimed, dead center in the target. A sense of satisfaction and confidence began to build as she prepared for the second shot, knowing that her repairs had been successful and that she was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The second shot rang out across the range with the same precision as the first, and Sarah watched through her scope as another perfect hit registered on the target. The rifle was performing flawlessly despite the sabotage attempt, and her confidence grew with each successful engagement. Around her, she could hear the steady rhythm of other Marines firing their weapons, but she forced herself to block out all distractions and focus solely on her own performance. Target after target fell to her accurate fire as Sarah moved through the qualification course with methodical precision. The first stage, which tested basic marksmanship skills at moderate ranges, was completed without a single missed shot. She had scored perfect hits on all 25 targets, establishing a strong foundation for the more challenging stages that lay ahead. Private Johnson, who had been shooting from a position 2 lanes to her right, glanced over with obvious surprise and frustration. He had expected the sabotaged weapon to cause Sarah to fail spectacularly, providing him with ammunition to argue that women were unsuitable for the sniper program. Instead, he was witnessing a display of marksmanship that exceeded his own performance. The range safety officer called for a brief break between stages, allowing the Marines to check their equipment and prepare for the next phase of testing. Sarah used this opportunity to inspect her rifle more thoroughly, ensuring that the repairs she had made were holding up under the stress of repeated firing. Everything appeared to be functioning correctly, but she remained vigilant for any signs of malfunction. Sergeant Davis approached her position with his scoring tablet in hand. His expression was unreadable as he reviewed her performance on the first stage, but Sarah detected a hint of approval in his eyes. He had been observing all of the Marines carefully, noting not just their accuracy but also their composure under pressure and their ability to adapt to changing conditions. "Outstanding work on stage 1, Martinez," he said in his gruff voice. "But don't get comfortable. The next stage is where we separate the shooters from the snipers." Sarah nodded respectfully. "Understood, Sergeant. I'm ready for whatever comes next." The second stage of the qualification introduced longer ranges and smaller targets, testing the Marines' ability to make precise shots at distances up to 600 yards. Environmental factors became more significant at these ranges, with wind speed and direction playing crucial roles in bullet trajectory. The targets were also more challenging, featuring smaller scoring zones and less forgiving margins for error. As Sarah prepared for this more demanding phase of testing, she drew upon the advanced techniques she had learned during her specialized training. She carefully observed the wind indicators positioned along the range, noting the subtle changes in wind speed and direction that could affect her shots. The tall grass near the target swayed gently in the breeze, providing valuable information about atmospheric conditions downrange. The mathematics of long-range shooting required constant mental calculations. Sarah had to account for bullet drop, wind drift, atmospheric pressure, and temperature variations that could affect the trajectory of her projectiles. Each shot required a unique solution based on the specific conditions at that moment, and there was no room for shortcuts or approximations. Her first shot at the 600-yard target struck just slightly left of center, a result of underestimating the crosswind. Sarah made a quick adjustment to her aim point and fired again, this time achieving a perfect center hit. The ability to analyze and correct for missed shots was a crucial skill that separated competent marksmen from truly exceptional snipers. As the stage progressed, Sarah found herself entering a state of focused concentration that blocked out all distractions. Her world narrowed to the view through her rifle scope, the feel of the trigger beneath her finger, and the rhythmic process of breathing and shooting that had become second nature through countless hours of practice. The other Marines around her were struggling with the increased difficulty of the longer-range targets. She could hear frustrated sighs and muttered curses as shots missed their marks, and the pressure began to mount on everyone to perform at their highest level. Several Marines had already accumulated enough missed shots to jeopardize their chances of passing the qualification. Private Stevens, who had started the day with supreme confidence in his abilities, was visibly sweating as he struggled to hit the distant targets consistently. His privileged background had provided him with excellent equipment and training opportunities, but it had not prepared him for the mental toughness required when things did not go according to plan. Sarah continued her methodical progression through the target array, adjusting her technique as needed to compensate for changing conditions. The wind had picked up slightly, requiring more aggressive corrections for windage. The afternoon sun was also beginning to create heat shimmer that could distort the appearance of distant targets, adding another layer of complexity to the shooting challenge. Her grandmother had often told her stories about the women who had worked in the factories during World War II, taking on jobs that had traditionally been reserved for men. These women had faced skepticism and discrimination, but they had proven their worth through dedication and excellence in their work. Sarah drew inspiration from these stories, knowing that she was continuing a legacy of women who refused to accept limitations placed on them by others. The third stage of the qualification introduced moving targets and time pressure, forcing the Marines to make quick decisions while maintaining accuracy. Sarah had always excelled at this type of dynamic shooting, finding that her natural reflexes and hand-eye coordination gave her an advantage over some of her competitors who relied more heavily on deliberate, methodical shooting techniques. The moving targets traveled across the range at varying speeds and directions, simulating the unpredictable nature of real combat situations. Sarah had to track each target smoothly while calculating the proper lead to ensure her bullets would intercept the moving objects. The physics of shooting at moving targets required an intuitive understanding of relative motion and timing that could not be easily taught through classroom instruction alone. Her first moving target appeared from the left side of the range, traveling at a moderate pace across her field of view. Sarah smoothly tracked the target with her rifle, calculating the appropriate lead based on its speed and direction. When her crosshairs reached the optimal position, she squeezed the trigger and watched as the target immediately stopped, indicating a successful hit. Target after target fell to her accurate fire as Sarah demonstrated her mastery of dynamic shooting techniques. Her smooth tracking and precise timing resulted in a series of first-round hits that drew admiring glances from the other Marines and even from Sergeant Davis, who rarely showed emotion during qualification courses. The complexity of the moving target scenarios increased progressively, with faster targets, multiple simultaneous targets, and targets that changed direction unexpectedly. Sarah adapted to each new challenge with the flexibility and creativity that characterized the best snipers. When conventional techniques proved insufficient, she developed innovative solutions on the spot, drawing upon her deep understanding of ballistics and marksmanship fundamentals. By the end of the third stage, Sarah had established herself as the clear leader in the qualification course. Her shot placement had been consistently superior to that of her competitors, and her ability to adapt to changing conditions had impressed even the most skeptical observers. The Marines who had sabotaged her weapon were now watching with growing discomfort as their plan backfired spectacularly. The fourth stage would test the Marines' ability to engage targets at extreme long range, with some targets positioned at distances exceeding 1,000 yards. At these ranges, even minor errors in calculation or technique could result in complete misses, and the psychological pressure intensified dramatically. Many Marines who performed well at shorter ranges found themselves overwhelmed by the demands of extreme long-range shooting. Sarah had spent considerable time during her training preparing for shots at these distances. She understood that success required not just technical skill, but also mental fortitude and the confidence to trust her calculations even when the targets appeared impossibly small through her scope. The margin for error was virtually non-existent, and every aspect of her shooting technique had to be executed flawlessly. The first extreme long-range target was positioned at 800 yards, a distance that challenged even experienced shooters. Sarah carefully studied the environmental conditions, noting the wind speed and direction at multiple points along the bullet's trajectory. The afternoon heat was creating complex air currents that could push her projectile off course if not properly accounted for in her aim point. She adjusted her rifle's elevation to compensate for the significant bullet drop that would occur over the 800-yard distance. The mathematical calculations required to determine the correct elevation setting were complex, involving multiple variables including muzzle velocity, ballistic coefficient, and atmospheric conditions. Sarah had practiced these calculations countless times until they became automatic, allowing her to focus on the more subtle aspects of long-range shooting. Her first shot at the extreme range target was perfect, striking dead center despite the challenging conditions. The other Marines watched in amazement as she continued to achieve precise hits at distances where many of them struggled to even see the targets clearly. Her natural shooting ability, combined with meticulous preparation and unshakable confidence, was producing results that exceeded everyone's expectations. As the qualification course entered its final stages, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The sabotage attempt that had threatened to derail her dreams had instead become an opportunity to demonstrate her resilience and resourcefulness. She had not only overcome the deliberate obstacles placed in her path, but had exceeded her own expectations in the process. The Marines who had doubted her abilities were now witnessing a performance that would become legendary within the training unit. Sarah was not just passing the qualification course, she was dominating it in a way that would reshape perceptions about the capabilities of women in combat roles. Her success was proving that excellence knew no gender boundaries, and that determination could overcome any obstacle. The afternoon sun began its descent toward the horizon as Sarah prepared for the most challenging phase of the qualification course. The final stage would test every skill she had developed over months of intensive training, combining extreme long-range shooting with complex environmental conditions and severe time constraints. This was where most Marines encountered their limits, and where the truly exceptional shooters distinguished themselves from the merely competent. Sergeant Davis gathered the remaining Marines around him for a final briefing before the ultimate test began. Several candidates had already been eliminated during the previous stages, their dreams of joining the elite sniper program crushed by missed shots and mounting pressure. Those who remained represented the best marksmen from their respective units, each one having demonstrated exceptional skill to reach this point. "Listen up," Davis commanded, his voice carrying the authority of years of combat experience. "This final stage will separate the snipers from everyone else. You'll be engaging targets at ranges up to 1,200 yards, under time pressure, with limited ammunition. Every shot counts, and there's no room for mistakes." Sarah felt her heart rate increase slightly as she absorbed the details of the final challenge. 1,200 yards was an extreme distance that tested the absolute limits of both equipment and human capability. At that range, a target would appear as little more than a speck through even the most powerful scope, and environmental factors could cause bullets to drift several feet off course. The scoring system for the final stage was unforgiving. Marines needed to achieve hits on at least 80% of the targets to pass, with bonus points awarded for shots that struck the center scoring zone. The time limit added another layer of difficulty, preventing shooters from taking excessive time to calculate solutions for each engagement. As Sarah walked to her shooting position for the final stage, she noticed the wind had increased significantly since the afternoon began. The flags along the range were flapping more vigorously, and she could see dust being blown across the target areas. These conditions would make an already difficult challenge even more demanding, requiring constant adjustments and split-second decisions. Her repaired rifle felt solid and reliable in her hands as she settled into her final shooting position. The makeshift repairs she had performed that morning had held up perfectly throughout the day, allowing her to focus entirely on her marksmanship rather than worrying about equipment malfunctions. The sabotage attempt had failed completely, serving only to strengthen her resolve and demonstrate her ability to overcome adversity. The targets for the final stage were arranged at various distances from 600 to 1,200 yards, each one presenting unique challenges in terms of size, visibility, and environmental factors affecting the shot. Sarah studied each target through her spotting scope, noting the specific conditions that would influence her engagement strategy for that particular shot. The closest target, positioned at 600 yards, appeared straightforward until Sarah noticed it was partially obscured by heat shimmer rising from the sun-baked ground. The distortion would make precise aim point selection extremely difficult, requiring her to wait for moments when the atmospheric conditions provided clearer visibility. At 800 yards, a steel silhouette target was positioned in an area where the wind appeared to be swirling unpredictably. Sarah observed the vegetation around the target area, noting how the grass and small bushes moved in response to the changing air currents. Successfully engaging this target would require her to time her shot for a moment when the wind conditions were most favorable. The most distant target, located at the extreme 1,200-yard line, was almost invisible to the naked eye. Even through her high-powered scope, it appeared as little more than a small dark rectangle against the sandy background. At this distance, the bullet would be in flight for nearly 2 seconds, during which time even slight changes in wind speed or direction could cause a complete miss. The ammunition allocation for the final stage allowed for only one shot per target, eliminating any opportunity to observe impacts and make corrections. Each engagement had to be perfect on the first attempt, requiring Sarah to draw upon all of her training and experience to calculate precise firing solutions without the benefit of trial shots. As the final preparation time counted down, Sarah went through her pre-shot routine one last time. She checked her rifle's zero, confirmed her atmospheric data readings, and reviewed her calculations for each target engagement. The methodical preparation helped calm her nerves and build confidence in her ability to execute the challenging shots ahead. Sergeant Davis raised his hand to signal the beginning of the final stage, and Sarah immediately began her engagement sequence. Her first target was the 600-yard silhouette obscured by heat shimmer. She waited patiently for a moment when the atmospheric distortion subsided, then smoothly aligned her crosshairs and fired. The distant sound of metal being struck confirmed a successful hit, and Sarah immediately transitioned to her next target without celebrating the success. Time was limited, and she needed to maintain a steady pace while ensuring accuracy on every shot. The discipline required to balance speed with precision was one of the most challenging aspects of sniper training. Her second shot engaged the 800-yard target positioned in the swirling wind area. Sarah had observed the wind patterns carefully and timed her shot for a brief lull in the air movement. The bullet flew true to its mark, striking the target center despite the challenging conditions. As Sarah continued through her target engagement sequence, she found herself entering the zone of peak performance that elite athletes describe when everything seems to flow effortlessly. Her calculations became intuitive, her movements economical and precise, and her confidence grew with each successful engagement. The other Marines were struggling with the extreme demands of the final stage. She could hear frustrated sighs and muttered comments as shots missed their marks under the pressure of time constraints and environmental challenges. Several Marines had already exhausted their ammunition allocation without achieving the minimum number of hits required to pass the qualification. Private Johnson, who had been confident that his sabotage would eliminate Sarah from competition, was watching in disbelief as she systematically engaged target after target with machine-like precision. His own performance was suffering as his concentration was divided between his own shooting and his amazement at Sarah's dominance of the course. Private Stevens had managed to hit several of the closer targets but was struggling with the extreme long-range engagements. His privileged background had provided him with excellent basic training, but it had not prepared him for the mental toughness required when facing seemingly impossible challenges. The pressure was beginning to show in his increasingly erratic shooting performance. Sarah reached the point in her engagement sequence where she would attempt the 1,200-yard shot that represented the ultimate test of her capabilities. This target was at the absolute limit of her rifle's effective range, and success would require perfect execution of every aspect of her shooting technique. She spent additional time calculating the firing solution for this extreme engagement, accounting for the significant bullet drop, wind drift, and time of flight that would affect the projectile's trajectory. The mathematics were complex, but her months of training had made these calculations second nature. The wind at the 1,200-yard line appeared to be blowing from left to right at approximately 8 miles per hour, based on her observation of the vegetation in that area. Sarah adjusted her aim point to compensate for the expected wind drift, knowing that even a small error in estimation could result in a complete miss at this extreme distance. Her breathing became slow and controlled as she prepared for the most challenging shot of her military career. The crosshairs settled on her calculated aim point, and she began the smooth trigger squeeze that would send the bullet on its long journey to the distant target. The rifle recoiled against her shoulder as the shot broke, and Sarah immediately followed through by maintaining her sight picture and observing the bullet's impact. For what seemed like an eternity, she watched through her scope as the projectile traveled downrange toward its intended target. The faint sound of metal being struck reached her ears nearly 3 seconds after the shot, confirming that her bullet had found its mark at the extreme distance. A feeling of satisfaction and accomplishment washed over her as she realized she had successfully engaged the most challenging target on the course. With the 1,200-yard shot complete, Sarah had only a few targets remaining in her engagement sequence. The pressure had eased slightly now that she had proven her ability to handle the most extreme challenge, and she approached the remaining shots with confidence and determination. Each subsequent target fell to her accurate fire as Sarah demonstrated complete mastery of every aspect of long-range marksmanship. Her shot placement was consistently superior to that of any other Marine on the course, and her time management allowed her to complete all engagements well within the allocated time limit. The final shot of the qualification course was fired at a mid-range target that would have been considered challenging at the beginning of the day but now seemed routine after the extreme long-range engagements she had successfully completed. The bullet struck exactly where she had intended, marking the completion of a performance that would be remembered for years to come. As the shooting ended and the range was declared safe, Sarah remained in her position for a few moments, absorbing the magnitude of what she had just accomplished. She had not only overcome deliberate sabotage and proven her capability under the most challenging conditions, but had also achieved a level of performance that exceeded even her own expectations. The other Marines began to gather around as the scores were tallied, and it became clear that Sarah had achieved something extraordinary. Her accuracy percentage was perfect, with successful hits on every single target in the qualification course. The 324 targets she had engaged represented a flawless performance that would establish new standards for excellence in the sniper program. The silence that followed Sarah's final shot was broken only by the distant sound of wind rustling through the desert vegetation. As the reality of her perfect performance began to sink in, the atmosphere on the shooting range shifted from competitive tension to stunned amazement. Even Sergeant Davis, who had witnessed countless qualification attempts over his decades of service, stood motionless as he processed what he had just observed. Sarah slowly rose from her shooting position, her legs slightly stiff from the hours of maintaining precise body positioning. The rifle that had been sabotaged that morning felt familiar and, trusted in her hands, its weight a testament to her ability to overcome adversity through skill and determination. She looked down the range at the 324 targets she had engaged, each one representing not just a successful shot, but a statement about her place in the Marines. The scoring process began immediately, with range safety officers moving down range to verify the impacts and record the official results. Sarah knew with certainty that she had achieved hits on every target, but the military required thorough documentation of all qualification attempts. The other Marines gathered in small groups, discussing what they had witnessed and comparing their own performances to the extraordinary display they had just seen. Private Johnson stood apart from the others, his face pale and his hands trembling slightly as the implications of Sarah's success became clear. The sabotage he had orchestrated had not only failed to eliminate her from the program, but had actually provided her with an opportunity to demonstrate capabilities that exceeded anything he could have imagined. His own score, while respectable under normal circumstances, was completely overshadowed by her flawless performance. The weight of his actions began to settle heavily on Johnson's conscience. What had started as a misguided attempt to preserve what he saw as male tradition had evolved into something far more serious. He had deliberately damaged military equipment and attempted to sabotage a fellow Marine's career, actions that violated both the military code of conduct and his own moral principles. Private Stevens approached Sarah with a mixture of respect and bewilderment in his expression. Despite his privileged background and natural competitive instincts, he possessed enough integrity to recognize exceptional achievement when he witnessed it. The performance he had just observed transcended simple marksmanship and represented a level of mental toughness and skill that commanded his admiration. "Martinez," he said quietly, extending his hand in congratulation. "That was the most incredible shooting I've ever seen. How did you manage to stay so calm under that kind of pressure?" Sarah accepted his handshake and looked him directly in the eyes. "I had good teachers and a lot of motivation," she replied simply. "When you know that people are waiting for you to fail, it makes success that much more important." As the official scoring continued, word of Sarah's performance began to spread throughout the base. Marines from other units started arriving at the range to hear first-hand accounts of what had transpired. The story of the female Marine who had overcome sabotage to achieve a perfect score was already taking on legendary proportions in the retelling. Sergeant Davis completed his review of the official score sheets and walked over to where Sarah was cleaning her rifle. His withered face showed no emotion, but his eyes reflected a deep respect for what he had witnessed. In his years of conducting qualification courses, he had never seen such a combination of technical skill, mental toughness, and grace under pressure. "Martinez," he said in his characteristic gruff voice, "I need to speak with you privately." They walked away from the group to a quiet area near the range equipment shed. Davis removed his cap and ran his hand through his gray hair, seemingly searching for the right words to express what he was feeling. In 30 years of military service, he began slowly, "I have never seen anything like what you accomplished today. The fact that you managed to repair sabotaged equipment and then shoot a perfect course under those conditions is beyond impressive. It's inspirational." Sarah maintained her military bearing but felt a warm glow of pride at the recognition from someone she respected so deeply. "Thank you, Sergeant. I just did what I was trained to do." "No," Davis replied firmly. "What you did today went far beyond training. You demonstrated the kind of character and determination that defines the very best Marines. The sniper program needs people like you, and the Corps is better because you're part of it." He paused for a moment, then continued with unusual emotion in his voice. "I want you to know that I will personally recommend you for advanced sniper training. Your performance today has earned you a place among the elite, and I believe you have the potential to become one of the finest snipers the Marines have ever produced." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Colonel Martinez, the base commanding officer who had been notified of the extraordinary events taking place at the qualification range. Despite sharing a surname with Sarah, they were not related, though the coincidence had been the source of some good-natured jokes during her training. Colonel Martinez was a distinguished officer who had served multiple combat tours and commanded the respect of everyone on the base. His presence at the qualification range indicated the significance that was already being attached to Sarah's achievement. He approached with the measured stride of someone accustomed to command authority. "Marine Martinez," he said formally, "I understand congratulations are in order." Sarah snapped to attention and rendered a crisp salute. "Thank you, sir. I was just doing my job." "Your job was to qualify for the sniper program," the colonel replied. "What you accomplished today was something entirely different. A perfect score under any circumstances would be remarkable, but achieving it after overcoming equipment sabotage demonstrates the kind of character we need in our most elite units." The colonel's words carried additional weight because of his reputation for measured judgment and high standards. His recognition of Sarah's achievement would effectively end any remaining doubts about her capabilities and her place in the Marines. As they spoke, the range safety officers completed their verification process and submitted the final score sheets to Sergeant Davis. The numbers confirmed what everyone already knew: Sarah had achieved a perfect score of 324 hits on 324 targets, a feat that would likely stand as a record for years to come. The other Marines began to disperse as the official qualification process concluded, but many lingered to offer their congratulations to Sarah. Even those who had initially been skeptical of her presence in the program now recognized that they had witnessed something special. Her performance had forced them to re-evaluate their preconceptions and acknowledge that excellence could come from unexpected sources. Private Johnson remained at the edge of the group, wrestling with his conscience over the role he had played in the day's events. The guilt was eating away at him, and he knew that he had to confront the consequences of his actions. The Marine Corps had taught him about honor and integrity, values that he had betrayed through his sabotage attempt. As Sarah finished her conversation with Colonel Martinez and began to pack up her equipment, Johnson approached her hesitantly. His face was flushed with shame, and his hands shook slightly as he struggled to find the words for what he needed to say. "Martinez," he said quietly, glancing around to ensure they would not be overheard. "I need to tell you something." Sarah looked at him curiously, sensing the distress in his voice and body language. Despite their past conflicts, she could see that he was struggling with something important. "I was the one who sabotaged your rifle this morning," Johnson confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. Stevens, and I thought that if we could make you fail the qualification, it would prove that women didn't belong in the sniper program. The admission hung in the air between them like a physical presence. Sarah felt a mix of anger and disappointment, though part of her had suspected Johnson's involvement from the beginning. She had chosen to focus on overcoming the obstacle rather than dwelling on who might have created it. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, her voice calm despite the emotions churning within her. "Because what you did today was amazing," Johnson replied, tears beginning to form in his eyes. "You proved everything I believed was wrong, and you did it with more courage and skill than I could ever hope to have. I can't live with what I did, and you deserve to know the truth." Sarah studied his face for a moment, seeing genuine remorse and recognition of his mistake. The Marine Corps was built on the principle that people could learn from their errors and become better through the experience. Johnson's confession was the first step in that process. "I appreciate your honesty," she said finally. "What matters now is what you do going forward. The Marine Corps is about more than just individual achievement. It's about supporting each other and becoming the best we can be." Johnson nodded gratefully, understanding that Sarah was offering him a chance at redemption rather than condemnation. Her response demonstrated the same character and integrity that had carried her through the qualification course. As the afternoon sun began to set over the desert training facility, Sarah reflected on the extraordinary day she had experienced. The sabotage that had been intended to end her dreams had instead become the catalyst for achieving something beyond her own expectations. She had proven not only her marksmanship skills, but also her ability to overcome adversity and maintain her composure under extreme pressure. The perfect score of 324 consecutive hits would become part of Marine Corps lore, inspiring future generations of marksmen to strive for excellence regardless of the obstacles they might face. More importantly, Sarah's achievement would help break down barriers and create opportunities for others who faced discrimination or skepticism about their capabilities. The qualification course that had begun as a test of marksmanship had evolved into something much more significant. It had become a demonstration of human potential and the power of determination to overcome any challenge. Sarah Martinez had not just qualified for the sniper program, she had redefined what was possible within it. The weeks following Sarah's historic qualification performance brought changes that rippled far beyond the confines of the desert training facility. News of her achievement spread throughout the military community, reaching the highest levels of command and attracting attention from military leadership who recognized the significance of what had occurred. The young Marine who had quietly overcome sabotage to achieve perfection had become a symbol of excellence and resilience. Sarah found herself thrust into a spotlight that she had never sought or expected. Interview requests came from military publications, and senior officers wanted to meet the Marine who had set new standards for qualification performance. Despite the attention, she remained focused on her primary goal of completing sniper training and serving her country with distinction. The advanced sniper school that Sarah entered was unlike anything she had experienced during her initial military training. Located in the mountains of North Carolina, the facility was designed to push students to their absolute limits while teaching them skills that could mean the difference between life and death in combat situations. The instructors were veteran snipers who had served multiple combat tours and possessed an intimate understanding of what it took to succeed in the world's most dangerous environments. Chief Petty Officer Williams, the senior instructor, was a legendary figure within the sniper community. He had served with distinction in Iraq and Afghanistan, accumulating more confirmed kills than any active duty sniper. His weathered face told the story of countless hours spent in hostile territory, where a single mistake could result in death for himself or his teammates. Martinez, Williams said during her first day of advanced training, "Your qualification performance was impressive, but everything you've learned up to this point has been preparation for the real training that starts now. Sniper school isn't about hitting targets on a range. It's about becoming invisible, thinking like your enemy, and making shots that others consider impossible." The curriculum was designed to test every aspect of a future sniper's capabilities. Students learned advanced camouflage techniques that could render them virtually invisible even at close range. They studied urban warfare tactics, desert survival skills, and the psychological aspects of long-range combat that could affect performance under extreme stress. Sarah excelled in every aspect of the training, demonstrating the same dedication and natural ability that had characterized her qualification performance. Her fellow students, all male Marines who had heard about her record-setting achievement, initially approached her with curiosity and skepticism. However, her consistent superior performance quickly earned their respect and acceptance. The marksmanship training at sniper school far exceeded the challenges of the qualification course. Students were required to make precise shots at ranges exceeding 1,500 yards, often under adverse conditions that simulated real combat environments. Sarah's natural shooting ability, combined with her meticulous attention to detail, made her one of the top performers in every exercise. One particularly challenging exercise required students to remain hidden in a designated area for 72 hours while avoiding detection by instructors who actively searched for them. The test evaluated camouflage skills, patience, and the mental toughness required for long-duration missions behind enemy lines. Sarah spent 3 days motionless in a carefully constructed hide, emerging only when the exercise concluded without ever being discovered. Her grandmother Maria visited the base during Sarah's training, traveling from Arizona to see the granddaughter who had become the talk of the military community. Despite her advanced age and limited mobility, Maria insisted on making the journey to witness Sarah's achievement firsthand. The reunion was emotional for both women, representing the culmination of years of sacrifice and determination. Mija, Maria said as they walked together around the base, "Your grandfather would have been so proud. He always believed that hard work and determination could overcome any obstacle, and you have proven him right." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes as she listened to her grandmother's words. The elderly woman had sacrificed so much to provide opportunities for her granddaughter, working extra shifts at the factory to pay for school supplies and clothes. Maria's unwavering support had been the foundation upon which Sarah had built her success. "I learned everything important from you, abuela," Sarah replied, using the Spanish term of endearment that connected her to her cultural roots. "You taught me never to give up, no matter how difficult things became." As Sarah's sniper training progressed, she began to understand the broader implications of her role within the military. Snipers were often deployed on the most dangerous and critical missions, where their skills could influence the outcome of entire operations. The responsibility was enormous, and the margin for error was non-existent. The psychological training component of sniper school addressed the mental challenges of long-range combat. Students learned techniques for managing stress, maintaining focus during extended periods of observation, and dealing with the emotional impact of their actions. Sarah found this aspect of the training particularly challenging, as it forced her to confront the reality of what her job might require in combat situations. Private Johnson, who had confessed to sabotaging Sarah's qualification rifle, was undergoing his own transformation during this period. His admission of guilt had led to disciplinary action, but it had also provided him with an opportunity for growth and redemption. He was assigned to additional training programs designed to address his underlying attitudes and help him become a better Marine. The guilt Johnson felt over his actions had motivated him to examine his own prejudices and assumptions. He began to understand that his opposition to women in combat roles had been based on ignorance rather than legitimate concerns about capability. Sarah's performance had shattered his preconceptions and forced him to acknowledge his own shortcomings. Johnson wrote a letter to Sarah during her sniper training, apologizing again for his actions and expressing his admiration for her achievement. The letter was heartfelt and honest, reflecting genuine remorse and a desire to make amends for his behavior. Sarah read it carefully and decided to respond, seeing an opportunity to help another Marine grow from his mistakes. "Dear Johnson," her reply began, "I appreciate your continued honesty about what happened. The important thing now is that you learn from this experience and become the kind of Marine our country deserves. We all make mistakes, but what defines us is how we respond to those mistakes and what we do to become better." The exchange of letters marked the beginning of an unlikely friendship between two Marines who had started as adversaries. Johnson's genuine remorse and desire for redemption resonated with Sarah's generous nature and her belief in the capacity for people to change and grow. Sarah's final examination at sniper school was a comprehensive test that evaluated all of the skills she had developed during her intensive training. The scenario involved a complex urban environment where she had to locate and engage multiple targets while avoiding detection by opposing forces. The exercise was designed to simulate the challenging conditions she might face in actual combat deployments. Her performance during the final examination was flawless, demonstrating complete mastery of every aspect of sniper craft. She successfully engaged all assigned targets while remaining undetected throughout the exercise, earning the highest scores in the history of the program. Chief Williams, who rarely showed emotion, was visibly impressed by her capabilities. "Martinez," he said after the examination concluded, "you have exceeded every expectation and set new standards for what we consider possible in this program. You're not just a qualified sniper, you're going to be one of the best we've ever produced." The graduation ceremony from sniper school was attended by high-ranking military officials who wanted to recognize Sarah's extraordinary achievement. Colonel Martinez was present, along with representatives from the Marine Corps headquarters who were already considering her for special assignments that would utilize her unique talents. As Sarah received her sniper certification, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the sabotaged rifle on qualification day to the successful completion of the most challenging training program in the military, she had overcome every obstacle through determination, skill, and the support of those who believed in her potential. Her first assignment as a qualified sniper would take her to a forward operating base in a classified location, where her skills would be put to the test in actual combat conditions. The mission would be dangerous and demanding, but Sarah felt prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. The Marine who had once been told she didn't belong in combat roles was now one of the most highly trained and capable snipers in the military. Her achievement had opened doors for other women and had proven that excellence knew no gender boundaries. The 324 consecutive hits that had started her journey were just the beginning of a career that would continue to break barriers and inspire others. As Sarah prepared for her deployment, she carried with her the lessons learned from overcoming adversity and the knowledge that determination could triumph over any obstacle. The sabotage that had been intended to end her dreams had instead become the catalyst for achieving something extraordinary, proving that sometimes the greatest challenges lead to the most meaningful victories. Her story would be told and retold throughout the military community, inspiring future generations of Marines to pursue excellence regardless of the barriers they might face. Sarah Martinez had not just become a sniper, she had become a legend, and her legacy would continue to influence the military long after her service ended. The young woman who had once struggled to repair a sabotaged rifle in the early morning hours had transformed into one of the most capable and respected Marines of her generation. Her perfect performance under the most challenging conditions had proven that with enough determination, skill, and courage, any obstacle could be overcome and any goal could be achieved.